In this lecture, we're going to set up the building under construction UI, so we will show the progress of the building as it's getting built. Let's go. If we take a look here in Unity, we've got our building under construction container. If we enable that, disable the other ones, we can see very simply here we have the name displayed that's under construction, and then a progress bar we would expect to get filled up as the building gets built. Let's re-enable those other UIs, and we can tell we're going to need a building under construction UI. Let's come over into VS Code, take our containers, make a new file, make that building under construction UI, put that in our GameDevTV, RTS, UI containers namespace, and make it the public class building under construction UI that extends mono behavior and implements the IUI element of type base building. It's important that this only works with the building, so we can scope our IUI element to base building, not just abstract commandable. Let's add those references to the components that we need to know about, the private TextMesh Pro UGUI unit name, and of course also the serialized field private progress bar. We know on enable for we want to enable this game object, and we know on disable we want to disable this game object. Exact same as what we just did in the previous lectures. On enable for we can also set the unit name with unitName.setText item.unitso.name. And we know we want to move this progress bar over time over multiple frames. What does that sound like we should use? A coroutine. Let's do start coroutine, animate building progress, providing the building, and rename the variable item to be building, so it's base building building. And then down here at the bottom, we'll do private IEnumerator, animate building progress, base building building. Remember that the building progress is not updated every frame. It's only updated at key intervals when a worker begins, stops, or resumes building, or the building is completed. But what we were doing was manipulating the start time, so we can always tell the exact progress based on the start time and the current time. So let's do while enabled and building.progress.progress is less than 1. And we'll check if the building progress state is not building. If it's not, we're going to yield return null to wait a frame and continue. This is like a guardian for a while loop, so we don't execute anything else if we're not in the right state. Outside this if guardian, we'll get the float start time to be building.progress.startTime and the float end time to be the start time plus the building.buildingso.buildTime. Then we've done this before. It's simply progressBar.setProgress to be mathf.clamp01 time.time minus start time over end time minus start time. Then we yield return null to wait for the next frame. That's all we need for the building under construction UI. We can come back to the runtime UI, and at the top we can make a serialized field, private building under construction UI, building under construction UI, and do all the same things we were doing before. On start, disable it. In refresh UI, if it's a building, well, now we need to add some more stuff here to check if the building progress state is not equal to completed. Then we want to enable this one. Else, if it's completed, we will enable the building UI. And if it's not a building, then we need to disable this one. So we can see now we're adding even more stuff to this already out of control refresh UI. This disable would also have to go into the bottom two else's. This will work. But we can see this is starting to get a little bit out of control and a nested if monster. Do you have any idea what we could do to simplify what's happening here? Well, since we know there's multiple building specific use cases here, we can create a container that will abstract all of the building UI management stuff away from this runtime UI. Let's make a new container, building selected UI.cs. Again, put that in GameDevTV, RTS, UI containers. Make it a public class, building selected UI that extends mono behavior and implements IUI element of type base building. Let's implement that interface and rearrange the enable for and disable functions. This one now has 3 references that it needs to fully work properly. The single unit selected UI, so a serialized field, private single unit selected UI, single unit selected UI. The serialized field, private building UI, building UI. And the serialized field, private building under construction UI, building under construction UI. Then over here on runtime UI, instead of having references directly here to these building UI and building under construction UI, we can remove those and add in a private building selected UI, building selected UI. So my challenge to you is to set up the building selected UI to control which UI will be displayed when a base building is selected. Also finish updating Runtime UI to utilize this new building selected UI instead of the direct building UI references that we just removed. The intention here is at the end, when we select a building, we're not going to see those double UIs. It's going to show the correct UI based on the state of the building. So pause the video, implement that. We've got almost all of it already there. It's just a matter of when and where to call things, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. All right, welcome back. I hope you're able to do this one. I know it was maybe a little bit tricky to make sure you hit all the points. So let's go through it together now. In Runtime UI, on start, we're going to need this building selected UI just to be disabled. I'm just going to look for all the compile errors and make sure that we're correcting those in order. Next is down in Refresh UI. If the commandable is a base building, we're going to want to do something. We're going to delegate all responsibility to the building selected UI in this case. So if the commandable is base building, just call building selected UI.enable for that building. Otherwise, we're going to do building selected UI.disable. And the single unit selected UI should only be enabled for the commandable if it's not a base building. We're going to even call single unit selected UI.disable before we do building selected UI. This building selected UI is going to have a reference to this, so that might be a little bit extra overkill, but just to be safe, we're going to disable it and then let the building selected UI do its thing. We're going to pretend like from runtime UI, we don't know that the building selected UI may re-enable that single unit selected UI. Then down here at the bottom, we'll just disable the building selected UI and remove the other line because we don't have that reference anymore. And do the same thing in the final else, where we will disable the building selected UI and remove the now missing line. Something like this is what you should have now for runtime UI. Still a little bit big in refresh UI, but much more clean than adding all of those additional cases in there. Now let's come over to the building selected UI. We really have three cases here, and it's based on the state of the building. So let's just do let's rename item to building. If the building progress state is equal to completed. If it's done, then we know we're going to choose between either the single unit selected UI or the building UI. If the queue is not empty, we also want to show this one. So we can check in here, if building.queueSize is 0, then we want to do single unit selected UI.enable for that building. Else, if there is a queue, we want to do building UI.enable for that building. And then in the top level else case, if the building state is not completed, we want to show the building under construction UI.enable for the building. We can't just do this though. We do have to disable any of the other ones that are not being enabled. If the building queue size is 0, we want to also do building UI.disable and building under construction UI.disable as well. But the building under construction UI is going to be disabled one way or the other. Let's just do that at the top level up here. Then in the else case here, if the building UI is being enabled, then we're going to disable the single unit selected UI. And at the bottom, else, we're showing the building under construction UI. We want to disable both building and single unit selected. And on disable, we're disabling all of them. So we can see we've moved a lot of this complexity out of runtime UI, which makes our runtime UI refresh UI a little bit more manageable. That's more or less what we're looking for in this challenge. If we come into Unity, let's hook up the building under construction UI to this building under construction container. Hook up the name and the progress bar. We're going to leave the under construction alone. That's going to be just static text. On the building selected container, we're going to go ahead and add that building selected UI. Hook up the single unit selected, the building under construction UI, and the building UI. On the runtime UI UGUI, hook up that building selected UI. And now let's click play and check it out. We select a worker, everything still looks okay. Multiple units, we see nothing because we haven't talked about multi-selection yet. That's all right. We'll get everybody gathering so we get some minerals. But while it's going, if we select the command post, we see just command post. We don't see the building, we don't see the progress stuff. If we start building a worker, oh no, it didn't update. But if we come back, it does. So we can see that we need to listen for some events. So as soon as we click this build worker, we don't have to deselect and reselect it, right? Now let's take a worker, tell them to build a building. And when we select that, here we go. We see it's under construction. Great. We do see the actions, so we're going to need to do something here to make sure that we don't show the actions while it's under construction. And if we try to click on anything else, we actually see we start getting flooded with some exceptions. So there's just a little bit of cleanup to do. I know it seems like there's still a lot, but this should be relatively straightforward. Let's start with the critical one about our actions UI throwing an exception. If available commands is null for some reason, this will throw an exception. So let's just wrap that with if commandable.availableCommands does not equal to null. That should solve our exception that was preventing selecting or deselecting units. To make sure that we're dynamically swapping between our single unit selected and our building UI, here in building selected UI, we just need to listen for when the queue's updated, which we already have a delegate for. At the top, let's define a private base building selected building so we can keep track of it and unsubscribe from the delegate when we're disabled. In enable for, we can just do selected building equals building, then selected building.onQueueUpdated plus equals onBuildingQueueUpdated. Then we can define that at the bottom as a private void onBuildingQueueUpdated that accepts an abstract unit SO array, units in queue. And we're going to basically just do this same bit here that we were doing on enable for, where we're checking the building queue size and toggling these two UIs. So we can refactor this to just cut this and call onBuildingQueueUpdated. Let's not provide any arguments here, which currently isn't supported, but let's scroll down to onBuildingQueueUpdated and update the naming to the discard naming because we won't actually be using this parameter. Then set the default value for that to be null, so our code above won't have to provide anything. Then we can paste what we cut earlier down here and rename where we have building in this code to selected building. So we're pulling it off the class now. So now on enable for, we're just going to disable that building under construction UI and then call onBuildingQueueUpdated, which will handle which UI should be enabled. There's just a couple corner cases we need to watch out for here. On enable for, we want to make sure we don't duplicate subscribe to this onQueueUpdated. Before we assign it, let's go ahead and unsubscribe. And out of an abundance of caution, on disable, let's also unsubscribe and make sure that selected building is not null. And then assign selected building to be null when we disable because there's no longer a selected building. The second thing that we want to watch out for is over here in building UI. We're doing the proper delegate handling checks here. But because we're assigning building to be null here and potentially multiple queue handlers, it's possible for us to end up in this handle queue updated when the building is null. So to save ourselves here, we can check if building does not equal to null and then set up the unit buttons. If we just walk through that, whenever we call cancel building unit, we're going to get an onQueueUpdated event, which we're listening for. But if something else happens and we get disabled, maybe from our building selected UI, we've set building to null, and then whenever our onQueueUpdated handler has been called, because they're both being invoked at the same time, we can still land into handle queue updated with building being null. So that should prevent some weird scenarios of us ending up with a null building and trying to come in here and set up some buttons when we don't have a building to operate on. Let's come back to Unity, click play, take all our workers together, select our command post. When we click build on a worker, there we go, the UI has changed. If we cancel one, it comes back. There's one more piece that we're going to need to handle. If we wait for a building to get fully built and keep it selected the whole time or select it right as it's about to get built, we'll see that the UI doesn't quite update properly. That's because we don't have the building spawn event. In the next lecture, we're going to introduce that building spawn event and finalize this UI interaction. When you're ready, I'll see you over there.